So, I recently started playing Elder Scrolls Online, and I got to around the 30-ish level range, and I think I've been playing for long enough to give some general first impressions about the game. I wanted to start by talking about the things I like, starting with the graphics. But first, I'm going to talk about Skyrim for a second, because this is really important to ESO. I think that Skyrim looks like shit. It looked good when it came out, but that was over 11 years ago. Holy shit. I thought that generally the game had beautiful vistas and environmental design, but the actual texture and graphical work on the game were so fucking awful. Now, with ESO, I really like the way that the game looks. I personally think it looks a lot like Skyrim, but more heavily stylized. The color palette's more diverse, and the actual graphical work put into the game doesn't look like muddy dog shit. Just the simple and small tweaks to the overall looks of the game, like having a brighter color palette, make a world of difference. It helped bring a bit more life into these wonderful environments and made me want to explore a lot more. Speaking of, the environments in this game are absolutely gorgeous. I think the vistas in the game are so artistically beautiful and diverse, even from just the handful of places I've been so far. The zone quests send you all around fucking Terraria, but I kinda like that. A lot of the quests that I've done so far involve me going from one area to another in a line rather than repeated circles, and the ones that did bring me back to essentially where I started didn't have me going back and forth between those places, and that's something that I really appreciate. My main MMO is Final Fantasy XIV, and a majority of the really early quests in that game just had you walking back and forth 10 fucking feet from the first guy. Are you serious? Just yell at him! I liked it when a quest led me to a completely different zone entirely because I liked running around and exploring new areas. I was a little disappointed sometimes when I was running around because I thought I'd be able to find more mini dungeons in the open world like Guild Wars 2, and I didn't really find any. Granted, I may have just not found many yet because one of the quests I had sent me to this thing called a delve, which looked a lot like what I wanted, but I'm not sure if those are just quest exclusives or I just lucked out and didn't find any. I'd have to play the game more to figure it out. But the game still really pushes you to explore by hiding collectibles in the open world, and these range from stat boosting collectibles like sky shards that give you a skill point whenever you get 3 of them, or lore books in different nooks and crannies of the world. I think it's really enjoyable to explore an area and find cool shit. Speaking of lore books, you can read fucking books in this game, like in Skyrim. And some of the books even give you a level for specific skill lines. When I first saw this, I thought it was cool as fuck. And it was such a simple mechanic, but I haven't seen it in any of the other MMOs that I've played so far. And I have to give the game kudos for doing something that I think is unique to the genre. I also like that when you interact with a lore book that it's permanently available for you to read from a menu. I don't have any plans to actually read any of them, but I really appreciate that the feature is there. The combat in this game is kind of hit or miss for me, because I think that the audio-visual side is fantastic. Your combat skills are flashy, but when you're in a group it doesn't look like there's a bunch of skill effects on screen blinding you. Plus, I'm still able to clearly see enemy attack indicators through my allies' effects. It's something I really appreciate as a tank in this game, and it's something I wish Guild Wars 2 would improve upon. On the mechanical side of combat, I don't really care for it. It's difficult for me to accurately describe it because I haven't played it at a high level yet, but since you have no cooldowns and you can freely flow from one ability into the next without any real consequence or without having to think about it, makes the combat feel incredibly floaty and spammy. I'm not 100% sure if that's because I've only really done low-level dungeons, but I hope the overall rhythm for the combat improves later on. And while I'm on combat, I might as well talk about dungeons, but I need to sidetrack for a second. ESO is a very anti-bullshit game. And what I mean by that is the game will just unlock stuff for you and give it to you once you reach the level requirement. So like, when I got to level 10, I unlocked the ability to use a mount, and the game just gave it to me without having to do anything besides press accept. The same thing applies to dungeons. When you reach the required level for a dungeon to unlock it, it just instantly becomes available for you to select on Group Finder. You don't need to do a prerequisite quest, and you don't even need to unlock a waypoint to it. You'll just be teleported inside when matchmaking ends. I think this is a big fucking double-edged sword, because on one hand, a player has the ability to instantly pick up the game and just start doing dungeons and shit with their friends. But on the other hand, there's no attachment to the content you're doing. I found myself constantly asking myself, why am I here? Or what's the point of me being here? And this is something that I've never thought about before when playing other MMOs, but it's because I've never really needed to. The other MMOs and MMO lights that I've played all have some type of build-up or preamble before unlocking the dungeon, explaining why I'm there in the first place. And this isn't something that's super important to most people, but to me, that led to a little bit of boredom while running around the dungeons. And to anyone that tells me to listen to the dungeon quest dialogue, I fucking can't, because matchmake groups will just go on and do the objective while I'm still trying to read or listen to the quest. And it really sucks too, because I think the dungeons from the handful that I played are awesome. There's diverse environments, layouts, and enemy designs. Like, I don't think I've seen the same dungeon layout repeated in another dungeon. And I have to give huge credit to ZeniMax for that, because the dungeon list in this game is fucking massive. So far, I think the game has great build crafting potential too. You get set bonuses from armor and weapons, and you have a massive fucking list of skills available for you to pick, choose, and level. Using an ability or weapon gets you experience for those specific skill lines, and it seems like every skill after you level it enough has the opportunity to morph into an alternative version of itself. For example, one of my Dragonite skills, this Lava Whip, at level 4 can morph either into a variant that deals more damage or into one that provides more utility for me. I think it's a great system, but I don't like that I can't see what an ability morphs into without leveling it. Thankfully, there's a wiki that shows what abilities morph into what, but I think something as important as that should be shown to you somewhere in-game. However, I think that may be just a UI limitation, which is a perfect segue into the part of the video where I completely rip into the game, starting with the UI. I think it's absolutely dog shit on keyboard and mouse, and I honestly have no better way of saying that. I understood that this game was also designed for consoles, but that's no excuse, because Final Fantasy has a perfectly usable UI on keyboard and mouse. Thankfully, it's at least still usable, but there's so much that I dislike about it. From the way your inventory looks, to the way that you navigate the map, to the way that you can't fucking find anything. And there's no accurate way for me to describe how bad the UI experience is without sharing an example, a common example of how I get frustrated with this game. So, I have a piece of gear from a dungeon that I randomly queued for, and it has a set effect that I want. Cool beans. I'm gonna go farm that dungeon with my friend. I'm a tank, and he's a healer, and we just kinda wanna run through it on our own, so we decide we wanna duo the dungeon. Okay, that's set. Now, what dungeon did this set piece drop from? Well, that's easy. First, I just go to collections, and then I search for the set name that I want to farm for. Okay, bet. So, this set drops from dungeon name. I don't even have the fucking name yet. Great. Awesome. Now, where's the dungeon? Let me just open up the world map and... Okay. Hovering over them all is out of the fucking question. Can I click on the dungeon name from the collections menu? No. Shit. Okay, what about trying to get it from the dungeon finder? No. Oh, okay, fuck. I guess I'll just Google it. And realistically, resorting to Google isn't something that I should have to do given how much other information is given to me in the game. Like, if I could find the specific dungeon that the set piece drops from, why can't I easily find where the dungeon is? And this is one of those complaints that I know doesn't seem like a big deal, but trust me, the frustration of it just started to add up over my playtime of the game to the point that I specifically mention how awful the UI is in my notes more than once. And while I'm still on the broader subject of UX, I think there's a few technical problems with the game. Like, for instance, sometimes when changing game settings, like the graphics, the game would just get stuck in a loading loop and just soft lock me out of the game, with the only way out being to Alt F4. And sometimes when loading into the game, my computer sounds like it's working a fucking double shift and about to explode. Now, the second part, I'm not sure if it's just due to my rig, but if anyone else experiences this, please let me know so I know it isn't just me. I do want to praise this game though for the amount of settings available for you to tweak. Going so far as being able to have custom colors for friendly and enemy AoE markers with individual scales for intensity. I think these settings are great, and I really think that other MMOs should steal some of these settings ESO has, and I'm looking at you, Guild Wars 2, because the amount of shit you could tweak and the amount of on-screen information that you have liberty overseeing is fucking phenomenal. The last thing I want to talk about is going to be kind of a big one, and if I'm being honest here, my opinions aren't fully formed on this, because I'm not completely sure how much this system actually affects other parts of ESO's design. That system that I'm talking about, of course, is the Crown Store. The Crown Store is the premium store in the game. You spend real-life money to buy crowns, which you then exchange for various things, from cosmetic items to actual in-game advantages. From what I've seen so far, the only advantages you get from the Crown Store is the ability to bypass certain time gates that the game has, one of those being mount leveling. And for the uninformed, every 20 hours you could go to a stable and pay a little bit of in-game gold to increase either your mount speed by 1%, their stamina by 1%, or adding an extra inventory slot. But remember, this can only be done once every 20 hours, except if you spend a few crowns to bypass that paywall. And I know there's a couple others too, like bypassing the time gating on some crafting stuff, but other than that, I'm not sure what other types of pay-to-win there is in this game. Besides the Crown Store, ESO also has a subscription model in the form of ESO Plus, and for 15 USD monthly, you get some crowns each month, and I think you also get unlimited bank space with it, and you get access to the crafting bag. The crafting bag is a second inventory that exclusively holds crafting materials. Originally, from this point on, was just going to be me just completely ripping into the Crown Store in ESO Plus. But then I remembered this is just a first impressions video, and I should really save my more nuanced opinions for like a real, actual review of this game that I plan on doing. So I'll instead say this, then talk about it in depth another day. Personally, the level of pay to win in this game doesn't get to me that much, but I understand for a lot of people that even mentioning the pay to win elements in a game completely turns them off of it. And I think that's a fine thought process to have. However, you're gonna miss out on the good experiences these games bring. Not to mention, I don't really think this game's pay to win is that egregious, because at the end of the day, the pay-to-win elements in this game don't affect my ability to do things like parse or contribute to my group or quest and etc. But that's the main reason it doesn't bother me. Overall, I think there's a lot that annoys me about the premium aspects of this game, but like I said, saving it for another time. And that's it for my first impressions of ESO. I'm excited to play more and explore more areas and do more dungeons, or even just sit back, run around the world, and quest. My overall enjoyment is pretty high despite the annoyances of this game's systems. After playing, I can see why a lot of people praise this game so much though. It's got good quest design, a pretty world, and really good combat readability, even if the combat itself feels a bit floaty. I'm liking it a lot so far, and I really can't wait to see what the game looks like toward endgame. Of course, that is probably a little ways away, but I've got a couple more videos planned for the meantime. But until then, stay safe.